We are live. Thank you guys so much for joining in. Captain, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So great. We're live. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have two very skilled debaters from Debate Art here to have a nice debate about a particularly relevant subject. So if you would like, I'm going to open up. I'm going to announce what the debate is about, and then I'll announce who the parties are. I will describe what the debate format is. And if you have comments or questions, you can absolutely leave them in the YouTube channel comment section, and we will have a chat once the conclusion of the debate occurs. So without further ado, the debate is, it is resolved that the US shall eliminate subsidies for fossil fuels. On the pro, we have Virtuoso, and for con, we have Blamonkey. Both of them are moderators at Debate Art. Now, the format, this is a Lincoln Douglas style debate, so the format is going to be as follows. We shall open up with a 6-minute from pro with their argument. We will then have a 60-second pause. A con will then have 3 minutes to cross-examine pro. We will then have another 60-second pause. Con will then follow up their cross-examination with constructing their argument as also rebutting pro's opening. We will then have a 4-minute pause for everybody to get their water and to have a breather while they construct the final bits. Pro will then have 4 minutes to be able to cross-examine con. Then we flip back to con, who will then have 3 minutes to put their conclusion together. And then we'll have a 60-minute pause, and we will then have pro concluding with 3 minutes. In total, each debater will have 13 minutes of speaking time. Of that, 3 minutes of it will be allocated to cross by con, and 4 minutes of it is allocated to cross-examination for pro. And as I said, anybody who has questions or comments, we can absolutely leave them in the comment section. So with that being said, are the debaters ready, or do debaters have any questions?
I am ready.
I am ready.
Okay, perfect. I will be announcing very quickly. I will just say 30 seconds left when it is a debate period, and I will announce that it is 15 seconds left when it's a cross-examine period. I will not be intervening. The only time where I will be intervening or commenting is if there's any inappropriate conduct or behavior. Please avoid ad hominems. That is the only thing that I would say is pre-agreed ahead of time. Everything else is fair game and will be adjudicated at the end. So without further ado, I will get my stopwatch. Pro, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6 minutes to you, pro.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank Blamonkey and Captain Septic for being here tonight. Tonight, I will be affirming the resolution that the United States ought to eliminate subsidies for fossil fuel. Before I begin, I would like to provide some basic definitions. Ought, used to indicate duty or correctness, typically when criticizing someone's actions. Eliminate, completely remove or get rid of. Subsidies, a sum of money granted by the government or a public body to assist an industry or business so that the price of a commodity or service may remain low or competitive. Fossil fuel, a natural fuel such as coal or gas formed in the geological past from the remains of living organisms. Value premise. The value premise that I wish to defend is environmental justice. The U.S. and the world have a moral obligation to make our environment safe and livable for future generations. The criteria for which I define environmental justice is survivability. The U.S. should ensure that our environment is safe, clean, and survivable for future generations. Indeed, if it is not, then our species will become extinct and we will take the rest of the world down with it. Plan. The U.S. must eliminate all subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. This could either happen all at once or be phased out over a course of 5 years or so. I personally prefer the latter. The Roosevelt Institute notes that, quote, there are 16 provisions in the U.S. federal tax code that currently subsidizes fossil fuel producers and could be eliminated to roll back fossil fuel subsidies by an estimated $8.7 billion per year, with a total of $20.5 billion per year in subsidies. This rule change would represent an approximate 40% cut to existing subsidies, though policymakers should work to eliminate all fossil fuel subsidies. Excluding the $8.7 billion documented above, the remaining subsidies amount to an additional $6 billion at the federal level and $5.8 billion across the U.S. states. Congress, in partnership with the U.S. Treasury and state governments, should end polluters' welfare by eliminating these subsidies. End quote. Contention number 1, environmental justice. The world is engulfed in a climate emergency. We must act quickly to make changes to ensure that our planet can survive. As it stands right now, the Earth is heating up at an alarming rate, driving many species to extinction. Indeed, we are losing species at more than 1,000 times the background rate. In 2019, 11,000 scientists signed a statement declaring a climate emergency. In this paper, they wrote, quote, the world must quickly implement massive energy efficiency and conservation practices and must replace fossil fuels with low carbon renewables and other cleaner sources of energy if safe for the people and the environment. We should leave remaining stocks of fossil fuel in the ground and should carefully pursue effective negative emissions using technology such as carbon extraction from the source and capture from air, and especially by enhancing natural systems. Wealthier countries need to support poorer nations in transitioning away from fossil fuels. We must swiftly eliminate subsidies for fossil fuels and use effective and fair policies for steadily escalating carbon prices to restrain their use. End quote. Fossil fuels are the major problem, and subsidies only make things worse. Contention number 2, cost. Fossil fuel subsidies are expensive. The U.S. spends roughly $20 billion in subsidies, which is more than 10 times the amount that we spend on education and more than 7 times that of renewable subsidies. Fossil fuel account for 85% of the global subsidies. We ought to shift these subsidies to cleaner energy and carbon neutral energy. Additionally, the money that we spend is better off going to education, build cleaner technology, and policies that actually help people. Instead, our government has decided to give welfare to the polluters at taxpayers' expense. Indeed, 10% of fossil fuel subsidies, just 10% of them, can pay for a green transition. Contention number 3, subsidies negatively impact the economy. Subsidies for fossil fuels make fuels cheaper, which encourages overconsumption. Higher gas prices encourage people to make public transportation, buy cleaner cars, and pollute less. Moreover, the subsidies that we give create a huge and dangerous economic bubble. If we learned anything from the dot-com bubble and the 2008 housing bubble, it is that all economic bubbles collapse. The larger the bubble, the more pain the following recession will become. If we follow my plan to eliminate fossil fuels gradually, we can avoid the worst of the recession if the bubble pops all at once. Moreover, if we phase out the subsidies and use those subsidies to transition into clean energy, we might actually help the economy in the long run. The Green New Deal may have a high price, but the price of inaction would be far greater. In fact, over time, the Green New Deal will actually pay for itself. So in summary, the world must act to prevent a climate catastrophe. Global warming is a fact, and I don't think Rob would disagree with
Last minute.
eliminating fossil fuel subsidies would play a major role in preventing such a catastrophe. Thank you so much. I stand by and I'm ready for cross-examination.
Perfect. I think if that we're going to have a 60-second pause while we wait for Con to gather their thoughts for the cross-examination.
All right, just let me know when it's up and I'll be good.
Absolutely. And we've got 10 seconds remaining for you to start your cross.
All right.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Open to you for cross.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Pro, as well, for this wonderful debate. Now, I do have a question in regards to the economic bubble that you posed. Do you have any direct evidence concerning the possibility of an economic bubble happening in the future because we invest in fossil fuel subsidies?
Yes, absolutely. And fossil fuel, just putting back up my notes, fuel economic bubble. There is actually a very dangerous economic bubble that economists, excuse me, agree. And this is a bubble. And my source here is the Guardian and the New Yorker,
Okay, but
and also the BBC that talk about the carbon bubble.
okay, and you talked about the definition of subsidies. Could you repeat that one more time, please?
Yes, absolutely. So a subsidy is a sum of money granted by the government or a public body to assist in an industry or business so that the price of the commodity or service may remain low. So that obviously has either by giving the money directly or sometimes by provisions in tax codes that make it more favorable to the company.
And also consumer, right? So if it's cheaper, if we offer a grant for people to say buy fossil fuels, that would also count as a subsidy, right? Because it's impacting subsidies business, right? I mean, fossil fuels business.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Okay, and it also works for consumers too, right? So if we make a certain industry more favorable, their product more favorable or more price competitive, and people end up buying more of that, that impacts the industry. That impacts fossil fuels. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what I mentioned in my last contention, is that when we have low fuels prices, we encourage overconsumption, and when we have higher gas prices, it encourages people and consumers to take public transportation, which will greatly reduce carbon emissions, and it encourages them to buy cleaner cars and pollute less.
Could you quantify that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How much of an impact do subsidies specifically have on, say, the competitiveness of green energy or green cars or shifting behavior in general?
From what I understand and what I've researched, it actually has a great deal of impact. Can't quote the exact number, but from what I've read, fossil fuels won't be able to sustain itself in the long run without such subsidies.
15 seconds.
Okay, I'm since there's not too much time left, I'm going to stop asking questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you both for being very courteous and keeping it to your times. We're going to give Con another 60 seconds to be able to gather their thoughts for the rebuttal and the construction of their argument as well. Now, if this were a different type of debate, we would have this moment for some form of sponsorship. So for future debates, if you want to invest and put your sponsorship time in here, now would be the time to do it.
Yeah, sure. So I am the head moderator of debateart.com, and Blamonkey is one of the voting moderators. So this debate is sponsored in part by debateart.com. It would not exist without that site. If you love debates as much as I do, join debateart.com and start debating.
That's perfect. Okay, Con, you've got 15 seconds, and then you can start your rebuttal and the construction of your argument. You'll have 7 minutes.
That was a nice plug. So starting now, or?
Sure, go ahead. If you're ready, you can start now.
Okay, just an off-term roadmap. I'm going to be addressing my case first and then my opponent's.
Perfect.
All right. I negate the resolution and offer the following framework. Value utilitarianism in the debate because it is the ideal method for gauging the integrity of a policy. Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy defines the principle as the claim that an act is morally right if and only if that act maximizes the good, that is, if and only if the total amount of good for all minus the total amount of bad for all is greater than the net amount of any incompatible act available to the agent on that occasion. Now, that's a lot of gobbledygook. Let me just put it simply. We're going to be maximizing the good and minimizing the bad. In fact, this idea is embedded within the Constitution, specifically Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imports, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. That last part is pretty important. If the purpose of the legislator, the body that creates law, is to provide for the general welfare of the people, then the only metric we have to determine whether the general welfare clause is being fulfilled under a specific policy is to measure the overall tangible effect on the people. How do we do that? A cost-benefit analysis. Let's look at my opponent's plan. Let's look at my own arguments. and see at the end of the day which one wins out as far as overall tangible impacts related to the economy and health of the constituency. So I'm going to offer the following definition for fossil fuel subsidies. I'm pretty sure me and my opponent are in agreement, but let's just do it to be sure. A fossil fuel subsidy is any government action that lowers the cost of fossil fuel energy production, raises the price received by energy producers, or lowers the price paid by energy consumers. And that is from Oil Change International. I'm going to offer my sole contention, which is that it harms the impoverished. Negate the resolution because eliminating fossil fuel subsidies would also eliminate the low-income home energy assistance program and similar measures that curtail energy prices while exacerbating existing inequalities in energy access. The low-income home energy assistance program, which I'm going to call LIHEAP from now on, is a state-administered but federally funded program that removes financial barriers to heating, cooling, and weatherizing homes for the destitute through block grants to states. The program fails to differentiate between clean and dirty energy sources, thus lowering the price of fossil fuel sources for indigent energy consumers, and in effect, basically giving a hand up to fossil fuel industries. But the Administration for Children and Families, under the auspices of the Department of Health and Human Services, determined that 5 million households were recipients to the LIHEAP in the fiscal year of 2014, and program grants offset residential energy prices on average by 17 to 35%, depending on the region of the individual grantee. Over 60% of those receiving heating and cooling assistance were at or below the HHS calculated poverty line. So the program primarily benefits those in the lowest echelons of income. By focusing efforts on the poorest in the United States, the LIHEAP is aiding those who suffer most from high energy costs. Energy nonprofit Groundswell finds in 2016 that the lowest quintile of earners pay nearly 10% of their income on energy bills, whereas the highest quintile pays less than 2%. As a result, the Energy Information Agency shows the magnitude of this in their 2015 study, which found that a third of households struggle to pay for energy costs, and 1 in 5 households give up things like food and medicine to pay for energy. The fact of the matter is, we shouldn't be trying to eliminate some subsidies that help the poor, especially when they're incredibly vulnerable. And moreover, as a result, the Energy Information Agency shows the magnitude of this. Study, which moreover, when we're talking about producer subsidies, we need to realize that it actually lowers the price for consumers as well. Let me explain. So Julius McGee of Portland State University explains why this will necessarily increase the price. As we get rid of subsidies, what we're going to do is lower drilling costs, and we're also going to lower profit and productivity for these energy companies. The problem with that is they're going to have to recoup that finance somehow, and the way they're going to do that is increase the price of their utilities. So the low income are going to suffer even more from high energy costs. And this is from Julius McGee of Portland State University, when she analyzes 175 countries in OECD from 1990 to 2014. And there's a reason why it costs, according to the 2014 evidence I stated before, over 60% of recipients depend on fossil fuel sources, especially natural gas. The fact of the matter is, it's really, really expensive to install green energy. Mother Jones in 2018 reports that installing a solar panel could cost anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 for a home resident. Which also means that half of the US population is precluded from enjoying the benefits of solar energy. So we see a twofold impact. Not only are utility prices going to increase, but we're getting rid of a program that specifically helps the poor. That's going to cause people to make a deadly decision, either pay for their energy or pay for medicine and food. Now, I'm going to go on to my opponent's case, which talks mostly of environmental justice, but let's understand that this isn't necessarily relevant to the debate. Jessica Jewell and her fellow colleagues at when they write for the Nature Scientific Journal in February of 2018, explain that subsidies in developed regions, like when we're looking at the global subsidy picture, in developed regions, subsidies in developed regions account for only 13% of fossil fuel subsidies in the world. So when we're talking about Western Europe, the United States, all these other developed nations, we represent such a minority of the fossil fuel subsidies, and we're only going to decrease by 2030 between 0.5 and 2 gigatons of CO2. Let's compare that. Let's compare that to the nationally determined contributions of the Paris Climate Accords, which could decrease CO2 emissions by 4 to 8. And even then, according to the Scientific American, that may not be enough because it's only going to limit it to 52 to 57 gigatons of carbon dioxide being emitted every year, when ideally, if we want to put it under the 2 degrees Celsius threshold, it's going to be between 31 and 44 gigatons. That 2 degrees Celsius threshold is incredibly important because UN evidence suggests after that threshold is met, we're going to be seeing massive decreases in crop yields and problems like that. So this environmental justice point doesn't work out, and also turn the economic point against them. If low-income people are unable to afford energy, that's going to cause a problem for the economy as well. Thank you.
Okay, that's perfect. We had 10 seconds left. That's great. So we are now going to move on to a cross-examine of 4 minutes for Pro. Pro, you've got another. You can have up to 4 minutes now for the both of you to prepare your thoughts. If you want to start before then and you both agree, then that's great, but we'll start the 4 minutes now.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I would definitely like to take the 4 minutes to prepare. I will let you know when I'm finished if I am ready before the 4 minutes is up.
All right, perfect. Three minutes left.
I think I'm ready whenever you guys are.
I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. So we will then start. Pro, you're going to have 4 minutes now to be able to cross-examine Con. So go ahead at any time.
All right, sure. So, Plod, do you agree with the scientific consensus that we are in a climate emergency?
Yeah, well, there's currently climate change, and the problem is, getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies isn't really going to impact the climate like you say it is. First and foremost, a lot of the nations that are going to be affected, according to that nature evidence I brought up, are going to be oil exporting nations. Like Russia and Saudi Arabia are going to have a much steeper decrease in CO2 than like us. And overall, if every single nation got rid of their emissions, as I said in the case, get rid of their fossil fuel subsidies, it would decrease emissions by 0.5 to 2 gigatons of CO2, which is paltry compared to the Paris Climate Accords if people, acceded to that and agreed to that and didn't, skirt the.
Yeah, but that's still, even if I can see that point, that's still better than absolutely nothing, correct?
Oh, well, that assumes that every single nation is going to be on board. Now, if we got rid of subsidies, it's entirely possible that we just keep on increasing purchases of gas and oil from other nations. It could also mean that oil just makes a comeback anyway. We're not going to be phasing out fossil fuels specifically with with just federal subsidies. It's a very mature, very old industry.
All right, sure. So let's go into your framework with utilitarianism. You claim that the poor will be hurt, but if runaway climate change actually occurs, and it looks like that we are on that path, don't you think that the poor will be hurt even more? Um, by if we, what I'm saying is we have to look at the short term and the long term effect. So if the long term, if the poor are being hurt by having to flee their homes and have to deal with extreme weather changes, that should be considered negative. Do you agree with
Right.
that?
But that's predicated on the idea that getting rid of federal fossil fuel subsidies is necessarily going to decrease emissions enough to really offset the possibility of climate change. And let's get one thing straight. It's going to happen regardless if we get rid of fossil fuel subsidies or if we don't. If every single nation on the planet got rid of fossil fuel subsidies, you would see a paltry decrease in emissions. Okay. And
All right, and
most of it's going to become from OPEC nations.
all right, and what is your source for that? I just wanted to take a quick look at
Um,
it.
it's from the journal Nature.
All
Let
right.
me get. I can send that to you if you would like.
Yes, please send that to me in a private message on debateart.com if you would, or on Discord, so I can take a quick look at it. That
Oh,
would
absolutely.
um, sure. So with the 11,000 scientists, obviously you would agree that we would have to implement energy efficiency, and we would have to eventually cut down on, or regardless if we want to make these planets survival, we're going to have to replace fossil fuels. That's not even the question. Would you agree with that?
Um, sure. Well, okay. Here's the thing, right? If fossil fuels are already becoming obsolete, like you say, it's not going to matter if we subsidize the industry. If they're really becoming so obsolete and so ridiculously like not even important, then clearly it doesn't matter if we if we
1
get rid of
minute.
fossil fuel subsidies or not.
All right, and also, you talked about the programs that help the poor. Couldn't we help the poor and eliminate fossil fuels? Why do you view them as mutually exclusive?
So the low-income home energy assistance program, here's the problem. It doesn't differentiate between clean energy and dirty energy.
What I'm
So
asking you is, don't you think we could put in a provision that would differentiate, and would even can't we put in subsidies and programs that would actually encourage and enable poor people
that
to?
would have to be part of your plan at the very beginning. You didn't mention anything like that, so you don't get any net offense off of a plan like that.
I would disagree with that, but we'll let the voters decide on that.
Okay.
Okay, 10 seconds.
All right, I am finished cross-examination.
Okay, perfect. So we will now have 1 minute for Con to get their thoughts together for the final conclusion. I will comment quickly to the judges that it is actually up to them to decide whether Pro was allowed to be able to use that or not. So that is completely up to the judges to decide. So we got 45 seconds, and then Con will give their summation.
Can you remind me, how long is Khan's next speech?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, and then I have 3 minutes after that, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, I thought I had 6.
It's 3 and 3.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay.
That's okay, Con. Whenever you're ready, your 3 minutes is starting in 5 seconds.
Okay. Just start now? Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to talk a little bit of what happens throughout the entirety of the 2 rounds that just went on, and I want to start at the very top of my opponent's case when we're talking about environmental justice and what exactly that one exchange was. I offered evidence from Jessica Jewell from this Nature scientific journal, and it showed essentially that we're not going to be having much of an impact whatsoever if we were to get rid of federal fossil fuel subsidies. Subsidies in developed regions, as I said, Europe, North America, and the Pacific OECD accounted for 13% of subsidy worldwide in 2015, but they're not projected to grow very much in the future. And again, we're not going to be making that much of a global impact on global warming. So even like I buy that global warming is an issue, but my opponent seriously needs to show why it's going to be that big of an issue and why federal fossil fuel subsidies in the US only is going to contribute to so much of that. And he never really does it. He never really offers a statistic suggesting that environmental justice is going to be substantially different. As a result of a passage. But if we're going to go a little bit onto his economic point about overconsumption, again, this is a point scant with evidence. It's a point scant with really any sort of sourcing about the possibility or likelihood of another bubble happening like in '08. In fact, we haven't had a bubble for oil since '08. So I'd be curious to see what that is, but turn that argument against him. If low-income people are unable to heat their homes and have to choose between medicine and food, between, making sure that they have their home at a healthy temperature and food or medicine, in itself, that is a deep harm to the economy. And it's not just like it's a minor problem. The Energy Information Agency in 2015 said a third of Americans suffer from that specific issue. And 20% of Americans, again, they suffer from that, not being able to afford food and energy. And when you live in a place like Florida, where my home state, heat strokes are a problem. If
1
you live-
minute.
Thank you. If you live in the northern region of the United States, cold can be a problem. In fact, if I could find the evidence here. So we're going to move on to voting issues in this debate. I presume this is my last speech. I could be wrong.
It is your last speech. You got 40 seconds.
Okay, we're going to move on to voting issues, and we're going to be real quick about it. When we're talking about environmental justice in today's debate, obviously Con wins. We're not going to be significantly stopping the problem of global warming. When we talk about the economics, we're going to be caring about the poor more than anything else in today's debate. Extend that across the flow. My opponent never really shuts it down. The only thing he has is a plan that he never really specified in the beginning and doesn't have an agency or an idea how we're going to implement this helping the low-income people. That's why you're going to be voting for the negation. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for keeping within your time there. And you're going to have 30 seconds, Pro, to figure out your final thoughts. And then you'll have 3 minutes, after which we will then answer some questions on YouTube. And I'll give a couple comments as well.
Okay, sure. So let me know when I should start speaking.
You can start whenever you want if you've got 45 seconds left, or you can start now. It's up to you.
All right. Give me the 45 seconds.
Okay. Okay, I should not talk into a microphone that's muted. All right, now you ended up getting a couple extra seconds there, David, so apologies to Con about that, but you've got 3 minutes now to be able to close off.
All right, great. Once again, I would like to thank Blamonkey for this debate, and thank you so much, Captain, for moderating. You've been a fantastic moderator, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. I'm going to summarize my arguments one more time. My value is environmental justice. My opponent agrees that there is a huge climate emergency, and my opponent agrees that we have to eventually eliminate fossil fuels or seem to reduce their emissions. Moreover, whether or not I was allowed to make an additional comment that we can provide housing and energy assistance for the low-income people while eliminating fossil fuel subsidies. I believe that I was allowed to do that, and my opponent's only response to that was to challenge the rules, so to speak. I'll let the voters decide whether or not I was allowed to do that. But my opponent, the biggest flaw in my opponent's case is that he never actually proved that we have to have an either or. We either have to help the poor or get rid of subsidies. Why can't we do both? Again, that is something that Blamonkey never really answered. As far as the economic bubble is concerned, I did point out several sources such as The Guardian, the BBC, and the New Yorker. So that there is a huge economic bubble. So yeah, I did actually provide my sources to him during his cross-examination. Where my opponent seems to drop that that they are expensive. I pointed out that only 10% can pay for green transition. He drops this as well. And I believe that if we do slowly transition by transferring the fossil fuel subsidies over to green transition, I believe we can have a more stable environment and help the poor while we're at it. And final point that I wish to make is that the long-term effects of global warming will be catastrophic to the poor.
Last minute.
That is something that I don't think my opponent addresses very well. When we are dealing with major hurricanes, tornadoes, and extreme hot and extreme cold due to global warming, obviously this will create climate refugees, which we would be morally obligated to support and help, and that will create another huge constraint on our system. So for those reasons, I strongly urge a vote for the affirmative. Thank you so much, and thank you guys for listening. And please join debateart.com if you haven't done so already, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel.
All right, that's a great shameless last plug there. That was very well done. Thank you both. That was well done to both of you. Thank you very much for keeping within the time. You were speaking fairly clearly. We could hear everything that was said. There didn't appear to be any sort of technical issues. So I think overall, from a fairness perspective, I think both sides had equal and adequate opportunity to present their case and to have any sort of opportunity to question the other. So that with that being said, I actually enjoyed moderating this. I really would like to see some other opportunities for us to be able to have these types of live debates. And I'd like to open it up for anybody who has questions, either questions about the subject, questions about debate art, questions about moderation, because you're speaking to two moderators on debate art right now. I am not a moderator on debate art, and or anything of the sort. So I will let David, you've got the YouTube channel open, so I don't know whether you want to repeat any questions that are there.
Yeah, sure. So I can see the chat on my StreamYard thing. So if anyone has any questions, any comments, please feel free to shoot them at me, and I will be sure to do so.
So from a judging perspective,
yeah.
and a comment just came in. Yes, anyone can judge. And how do you envision that we take the judging?
So what's going to happen is that I'm going to select a couple of people, and we're going to do what's called a judicial judging, and I think that's what Blah and I agreed. And that's when we select a group of people that we trust to make a solid vote, and those people will only those people will be allowed to actually vote on the debate.
Oh,
so
okay. Sorry, I got confused about that. Yeah, no.
Would you agree to that, Blah, or would you prefer open voting?
Oh, no. We agreed to that. I just forgot. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's perfectly fine. So right after we finish questions and comments and stuff like that, we will be doing kind of like a debate debrief and cool down thing, so to speak.
Yeah, perfect. If people are still listening on YouTube, are there any thoughts about having live debates? And obviously this is the first one, so make sure that we have imagery showing, and there's other things that can be done. But what are people's thoughts on this open debate, live debate forum on YouTube or Facebook?
And this is. I think we should set to together a panel of voters. Actually, sorry about that. Okay, that is perfectly fine. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, isn't that what we decided on?
Yeah, that
Okay.
is decided on.
Is that not the same thing? You're going to get a panel of the people that
Yeah.
you trust.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the same thing as the judicial voters.
I responded to Fola because he had a question regarding that, and he wanted to judge, and I feel bad, but
Okay, something I wanted to, I was going to bring up is that prior to this debate, we had a quick conversation about having some micro debates. David, do you want me to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, Richard said, I'm entirely in favor of this live format, and so am I. I really hope we can do more. But yeah, let's talk about the micro debating stuff.
Yeah, so one of the things that we had been discussing is trying to get people to come to the site and to participate a little bit more. And with that, there's a little bit of I think, a barrier to entry where people don't want to judge because a lot of the debates are very long and the judging criteria is understandably strict. So what David, myself, and Blamonkey were talking about is having a specific type of format that we would call a micro debate. So we would set that all the definitions would be the definitions as in, say, Merriam-Webster's dictionary, so that they can't be, or you're not wasting time to try to figure out what you're talking about. We would limit the characters to, say, 1,000 or 2,000 characters. We would limit the number of sources to only be 2 or 3 sources, and we would also try to limit the time. And the objective about that is to have them short and snappy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're less persuasive. Often the power to communicate effectively, it's a lot more difficult to do it when you're doing it succinctly. And so with that, myself and the two aforementioned are going to try a couple out on the site, and we're going to see if we can get a standardized format that can be used to try to encourage more participation and more judging.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested to see how that all would work out and how that would play out. And Captain, maybe you could write out a few sample cases that are micro format. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll give some. Now, every single debate type can be a micro format, but we'll start with a couple that will show that format really works well for it. Another good reason why you can use a micro debate format is because then you can actually have multiple debates about the same subject, and you're not necessarily going to be talking about the same thing. So you could have 5 or 6 different debates on the subsidies of oil and whether they should be permitted or disallowed. And if it's in a micro debate format, all 5 or 6 of those debates will probably focus on different elements. So it could be, I think, quite powerful and give a lot more people opportunity to be able to converse.
Yeah, definitely. So if we don't have any more comments, let's just start by kind of debriefing. So comment, who do you think won?
Okay, if you want me to be straight out and kind of, I can give my decision and my reasons for decision right now, if you like.
Yeah, sure.
So I would. It could be, I think, quite powerful and give a lot more people opportunity to converse.
Yeah, so I would like to remind to the voters that, of course, Captain is going to give his thoughts, but please do not let Captain's thoughts here actually persuade you one way or another. So just reminding the voters about the voting standards. Obviously, since we're picking people that we both know and trust, that shouldn't be an issue.
And it's not different than the current voting style, because people give their reasons for decision before other people vote anyways, right? I mean, we do that online as it is right now. It's just I'm doing it verbally, right? So I don't think there's any difference. And I agree with you. I think that people will be quite balanced. The good people will be very balanced. For me, I found that the arguments by Con in terms of the overall effectiveness as it relates to the climate, I think Con was very persuasive with a very powerful article from Nature. And one of the things I noticed about that article is that he referenced that was a study from 1990 to 2014. So yeah. We're not talking about just a small segment. I thought that was a very powerful and persuasive source.
Yeah, I definitely there.
Yeah. So from your perspective, David, you took the approach that subsidies are a direct causal relationship to climate change, and specifically subsidies in the US. But you didn't even talk about the percentage of carbon that's created by the US from a global perspective. You didn't support at all that, in fact, there is enough consumption and creation of climate changing affects that this subsidy will have a measurable impact. And Con was very good at the end saying, you didn't do that.
They did a pretty good job with this one.
Yeah. So I
kind of
got
my case up pretty quickly.
I got just basically on that.
So,
I thought that the sources.
Do you think
were
I was
very
allowed
powerful.
when I said that we can help the poor and eliminate fossil subsidies and Blamonkey challenge that I wasn't allowed to do that? What are your thoughts? Was I allowed to do that?
I think you were. I think it was a valid report. I think I don't think that in your argument you needed to slice every potential element, and I don't think that was necessary. So I certainly wouldn't say you weren't allowed to do that. However, even if you were allowed to do that, that would have, even if that rebate or that exception would have been applied, there's a number of problems with that Con had already kind of alluded to as well. And effectively, it's when you are giving subsidies, or when you're allowing the consumer to purchase the product at a cheaper price, it doesn't matter where that money's coming from. It is a de facto
I'm sorry,
subsidy.
I think you dropped out some. It doesn't matter what?
It doesn't matter whether it's a direct payment to the supplier.
Captain, can you hear me?
Yep, I can. Can you hear me?
Blah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Captain, I think you kind of dropped out.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Captain.
Okay. David, can you hear me?
That is weird because I cannot hear him. I can hear you.
Oh, no. So I'll... well, this is awkward. I'll tell you what Captain just told me.
Okay, sure.
He's saying that you could have run the plan, but it seemed that my arguments already addressed part of it.
Yeah.
The plan that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's effectively it.
Yeah, but also, and I think this is something that has to do with the NSDA rules. Typically, when you end up making a plan like that, you would want to put it at the beginning so we could debate the entire plan and not just little snippets of it. Because, like, if you came up with an argument about, I don't know, monetary policy, and I go, oh, we could do this, and then the next argument, oh, I could do that instead. It's sort of like moving. It's a goalpost on wheels. So you'd want to be very careful with that. Some people look badly on it, some don't. I had another response, but that response that I gave you was sort of like a Hail Mary because I was freaking out and having a bit of a nervous breakdown in the middle of cross-X.
Yeah, why were you nervous during cross-X?
Oh, I just naturally am nervous. I've done this for like a lot of years, but that never makes you not nervous.
Yeah, I feel like this is like my 6th live debate or so on my personal channel, and I definitely want to get better at it, and this is kind of why we're doing that here.
Oh, I didn't mean to did we kick Captain Skeptic? I didn't mean to do that.
Oh yeah, hold on a sec. Hey, Captain, welcome aboard. Sorry, I think.
No. Yeah, I could. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Perfect.
Yeah, I can hear you guys' discussion, and I know Block could hear me, but there was I think one of the issues as well at the end, and I heard Block saying, some people would disapprove of you including that because the plan needs to be fairly well constructed, and I do get that. I certainly do get that, and I think one of the issues there is that Blom made a direct relationship about the effect on the impoverished that you did not address at all.
Yeah, and
that was fairly large. So, listening to what Blom saying, I can certainly appreciate why some people would say, no, that's even if you had a home run of an answer, that it shouldn't be counted.
Yeah, no, of course. My answer, of course, was that in the long run, without fossil fuels, they'll be harmed even more by runaway climate change.
You know what I think would be really good? There's this piece of evidence from the Council of Foreign Relations, and I judged this debate at local tournaments because this was an LD debate at one point. a bit ago, where it was like something along the lines of $6 billion worth of subsidies keeps half of fossil fuel businesses active, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
If you could find a direct link, like Captain Skeptic said, or a direct piece of evidence like that explaining how much oil drilling is there because of fossil fuels, I think that would have made it a much more cogent argument.
Yeah, I feel like that was my biggest error in my overall case. By the way, how would you feel about doing something like a debate this time next week, and kind of keep doing this like on a regular scheduled basis?
I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. That would be great. I think we can actually have people try to apply to be in it, and eventually get to the point where people will be effectively invited, and they'll want to be the feature debate of the week, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I could take a turn debating. I could take turns moderating and stuff like that. I think that would be fantastic. It'll be great for the future of debateart.com. And
for the record, I thought you'd find this weird. I ended up losing my place halfway into the debate, so if I came off as scattered, I apologize.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. Everyone, I think that happens to the best of us.
David, can I bring up a couple points on your position? And
sure.
I thought the tactic you took was extraordinarily risky. And the reason why I would say that is, in your opening, you had mentioned things like extinction, you had mentioned climate change, you had mentioned such very, very broad and wide stroke statements that you didn't tie necessarily together, and you really exposed yourself. Khan could have picked apart and focused just on one of them. And that the problem is, when you open up with something so broad like that, you are literally pointing your boat sideways, allowing them to attack anywhere. You need to be far more precise and head on. And I think a more effective argument for this, if I were to choose your side right off the top of my head, I would actually say they're not necessary. If only 13% of the subsidies are actually, if only 13% of the total amount is actually spent on subsidies, it's just fundamentally not necessary. And I would have also argued that tax breaks or tax incentives for the poor do not actually constitute a subsidy for the manufacturer. They are a consumer or tax subsidy for the individual citizens. Narrow it down. Just narrow that shit down so that there's not nearly as many ways for them to attack. I don't know, Blah, what do you think?
I think, a cross-examination. I asked you about the profitability. I'll get to you in a second, Fola, because I wanted to say this. The profitability of fossil fuels, and how, if it goes to the consumer, it's still helping the fossil fuels, right? So it still counts as a subsidy. That's when you could have been like, no, don't do that. You're wrong.
Yeah, Phil Law actually brought up something pretty good. He just made a pretty good comment. I said, I was glad Blah brought up the issue of the impoverished, because the net surplus of my solar panels that I don't use is given back, goes to them.
Well, and actually, one thing that you didn't comment on that Blah had made is green energy is not just solar panels, and it's not just solar panels on an individual house.
Right.
So Blah had teed up saying, look at the barrier to entry, the cost of a house on solar panels on a house. You're like, yeah, but that's not the only form of green energy.
Right. And of course, over time in the future, the price of solar panels will inevitably go down.
True, but you've got other sources you've got wind, and you've got wind that are connected to the grid, and then you've got hydroelectric. You've got, for example, in some places, there's a lot of places around the world that actually don't use any fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that fossil fuels aren't used to support. You've got the trucks that are used to put up and to maintain, and there's still a fossil fuel footprint, even when you're talking about green energy, which people don't talk about. But the point is that even I think your argument was so broad, Blah was able to attack it, but you didn't really pick apart some of the potential flaws that Blah was saying. He
Right.
threw up a couple softballs that you didn't go after. And I think by those two things, that's why I would say that Blah was the winner. That was a
Yeah.
fantastic source, by the way, Blah.
Yeah, I definitely was kind of blindsided by that.
I saw the source and I was like,
Definitely should have been a little bit better prepared with that.
so when you prep a debate, David, sorry, Vert, when you prep a debate, do you look out for blocks?
Like, not really. No, like, I did kind of download the debatebrief.com. They had a really good stuff on this, and I didn't really get a chance to go through the negative blocks.
So what you want to do if you have a brief like that, look through some of the arguments, because all the arguments I made probably have been made before. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, of course, and same with me.
Yeah, well, I figured, yours is probably going to be about climate because it's subsidies, and like that's not a bad thing. I mean, usually the stock arguments are the ones, like the easy arguments, the easy fruit are the ones that are the most cogent. And
No.
you were right about, but by the way, about increasing the fossil fuels from subsidies. It does happen. You just needed a piece of evidence from that, and you needed to have a block against what I was saying. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it's out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. So Phil Long just pointed out, absolutely agree. However, what green energy turbine does not use petroleum for lubrication, and that is definitely, I think, a valid point.
Well, what I said is that there is a, and I did say that there is a carbon footprint for the installation and the maintenance, because you've got all the trucks that are running to service and they run on petrol. So there is a carbon footprint or a fossil fuel footprint that is that is net. And so it's not an elimination by any means, but it is a drastic reduction. The real key factor was, even if you eliminated all subsidies, would that actually even make a difference?
Right. And of
And
course,
you couldn't say that it would. And Blah clearly demonstrated that there's some serious questions whether it in fact would.
right. No, of course, I think that any impact is better than no impact. So even if I would concede that the impact is so minimal, it's still better than absolutely nothing.
And to answer your question, Phil, however, what green energy turbine, that is a thing too. And I think if I were to make an argument like that, or if Bert were to make an argument like that, the response would be, that is true, but we're talking about lifetime emissions, because like at the start, if I'm not mistaken, it is true that energy turbines or green energy might have a higher initial cost when we're talking about carbon footprints. I mean, that might be true, might not be true, but we're talking about like lifetime overall impacts on CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
That's going to be a much bigger impact than just a small. It's going to be a much smaller blip in the CO2 footprint. And I hope you can understand what I'm saying. I'm currently on like 2 hours of sleep.
I totally understand.
That's a very dangerous block as well, because to Blah's point, it really reeks of insignificance. I mean, you're pulling fly shit out of pepper at that point. It doesn't even address the fundamental point. So I think if you try to use that as an argument, you would actually do yourself more harm than good, because you're not earning points by that. You're missing the fundamental key factor. I would say that from speaking in a cadence, and I know you guys kind of both of you lost your point, kind of your touch points a couple times, not too big. It was generally good. The closing was a little bit rough for you, David, and I was wondering, why do you think it was rough for you? Were you really shattered? I think
I was a little bit tripping up on what to actually say there. So for that closing, the rebuttals and the closing round is kind of where I start tripping up and figuring out, okay, what do I say in this case? So I figured, okay, I don't really know what to say, so I'm just going to go through my case and briefly summarize each point and what I think Blah did or did not respond to, or anything like that, and so forth.
Do you flow, David?
What was that?
Or do you flow?
What do you mean? What do I flow?
Here. Would it be bad to show my camera? Because I'll show you what I do.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. Feel free to show your camera.
Let's see. Come on, do this. Come on, don't do this to me, camera.
Yeah, If you want, you can also share your screen.
Yeah, but it's not on my computer. It's what I've written down.
Okay.
So while you try to get that, I'm going to point out one thing. David, you actually mentioned the word moral and morality in the opening, which again was very risky. Blah didn't touch on that, but you could have then appealed to a higher power. You could have appealed to the audience based on the res ipsa morality of the environment in your conclusion, and because that's all you had, because you kind of lost the factual debate. You could certainly try to appeal to the higher standard in your closing.
Right. And I think I didn't know if this was relevant or not, but I really think I should have attacked utilitarianism and maybe say, okay, utilitarianism may be flawed because it denies the minority their rights.
Yeah. There was a lot to be done with the utilitarian argument as well. But let's see what Blah has here.
Oh, so first off, I'm going to show you the flow, and then I'm going to talk about that. If you can read it, if you can't, that's okay. Basically, what I did was I looked at when you were giving your speech, I wrote down some of the basic stuff you were saying in the margins.
Yeah.
Just like little blips, just to get the main points. And I drew an arrow, and I sort of made my speech over here in the red text because I was calm.
Yeah.
And I think that helps me out organizing, so you don't just go down your case. Because what you want to do is you want to address your opponent's points and then go right into the voting issues, which is what matters. What are we voting you off on? Oh, and by the way, surprise, yes, I am in fact a 19 to 20-year-old disheveled college kid who does not brush his hair.
Yeah, hey, I'm 25. My hair is even worse. Hold on a sec. I'll show you my hair in a sec.
Oh, we're doing cam party? Okay, well, I'm going to turn my camera off for now because how do I do that?
So I actually did the exact same thing when I was taking notes from a judging perspective. I literally have it mapped out the exact same way. Figuring out who was saying what was going on, and I actually found that my notes for Blah were I had far fewer notes for Blah than I did for you.
Yeah. So my COVID-19 hair is pretty shitty.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say?
Oh, I said, here's my COVID-19 hair.
You look fine, David. But yeah, that is true. Okay, so you were just writing down notes of what people were presenting, Captain?
Yeah. So I structured it fairly much the same way, but I was really looking for floaters. What are things that are actually being floated up and then being addressed? And then what I found is I ended up writing a lot more at the beginning for David because he was throwing a lot of things like morality and extinction and climate change. There was a litany of things. And I find actually, Blah, that you hammered a couple of them, but then you tied it off very, very tightly on a couple of times. You didn't just say it and then move on. There was a couple of times that you kind of circled around to make sure that knot was tied tight.
And there's a couple comments in the thing that I think, Phil Wall says, there is a huge difference between having 2 days to prepare an argument with Darton having to do it in 2 minutes live. And yeah, that is very true. And John replies, this looks really difficult, and it is 100% difficult. And Bennett, he says the live format is harder, and you gotta know how to speak. You gotta you have just so few minutes to actually prepare. And okay, you're throwing this at me. How do I respond? I have to think of something on the fly.
Yeah.
You are right, Captain. I had a lot of other notes I was going to make, but I forgot I had a 3-minute time limit, so I kind of screwed myself on that. Because I wanted to talk about your framework, and I think and this is a very common thing with LD debate is you have a very specific framework. In this case, environmental justice. One of the main responses you're going to see is that it's overly restrictive of the debate. We don't want to just talk about environmental justice. We need to talk about other things and weigh them. That's a very common tactic in LD debate. So just prepare for that sort of stuff as well. Are we nearing the time where we have to shut off now?
We have unlimited time, basically. If you guys want to keep talking, we are. We can continue talking as long as we want to.
Well, how was the moderation, guys? Was that appropriate? How was that done?
You did wonderful.
I think you are a fantastic moderator, and Captain, I hope to debate you live one day soon.
Okay,
And
we'll bring it on.
yeah, if you're if you're available at 10 p.m., if both of you guys are available at like 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time next week on Friday, I would be very happy to do another live debate. And perhaps, and Blah, are there any topics we can talk about topics this coming week? I was just thinking, you and Blah and Skeptic, I think both of you would be a pretty formidable debaters. So if you want, you guys can be debating, I can do the moderating.
Sure. I mean, I'd have no problem with that at all. Yeah, we'll come up with.
Yeah, sure. So so subscribe to my YouTube channel and join debateart.com if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much. So I will be talking over the week and pick up a topic.
Leave a comment below about what topic we should debate next.
Yeah, definitely. What guys do you think we should debate?
If this video hits 200,000 likes, we will totally do it.
And you know what? Actually, we'll even add something to it, and that is we can crowdsource the topic, but then we will randomize who is pro and who is con.
That's great.
I think that will be fantastic because that'll kind of keep me on my toes a little bit. And okay, do I really agree with this topic or do I not agree with this topic? It doesn't matter. And I think I did a death penalty debate. I think I did one as pro and one as con. And it really kind of opened my eyes to the arguments from both sides.
Yeah, it should. It absolutely should. And people should be encouraged to do that. Debate something from the other side, because unless you are truly trying to understand and argue the other side, you really don't even know the full merits of your own side.
Right. And the longer philosophical debates that I do, like on the existence of God or in evolution or other scientific topics, one thing that I like to do is start off by doing a steel man, which is basically the opposite of the straw man. I actually did a YouTube video on the steel man, where you actually, in your own words, present what you think the other side is trying to say. And the objective is to basically make the other side say, I wish I would have said that myself. And that's how you know that you guys are having an honest discussion, and that's how you know that when you do that, there's no room for any saying like you're misrepresenting my argument or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's leave it then. I look forward to we'll chat on the site, and then we'll figure out what's going to happen this time next week.
All right, join me at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time next week for more debates. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Happy weekend, everyone.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.